moderator for today. First, Dr. Shishir Narayan. He is a consultant at Shroff Eye Center. He did his MBBS from UCMS in 1990 and was awarded the DMA Best Medical Graduate Gold Medal. He has done his MS from GNEC New Delhi in 1994. He has completed his research fellowship in uveitis in 1994. He was a VR fellow at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai from 1994 to 96. He has done his FRCS from Edinburgh and FRC off in 1995-96. He was a registrar at Yorkshire Uveitis Register. He was a vitreoretinal fellow at Hull in England in 1999. He has special interest in ocular imaging, especially pediatric UWF imaging, and he has done his DNB training at Shroff Eye Center. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Shishir Narayan. We are very grateful to you for having taken out time from your busy schedule to teach the postgraduates. We are also very grateful to Dr. Pooja Sinha for moderating this session. Dr. Pooja Sinha is a senior vitreoretinal consultant at ABI Institute, Patna. I'd like to request Dr. Pooja Sinha to take over the session, please.
Can I please request Dr. Shishir Narayan now to please go ahead with his talk on retinal vasculitis. So over to you.
Thank you, Satyajit, for such a nice, warm welcome, and Dr. Pooja for inviting me to talk on a topic which is very dear to me. I'll not waste any further time and straight away start off, and so that we have time. My screen sound very audible?
Yes, it is audible. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll start off because it is for postgraduates, and we don't usually give talks for postgraduates. So I've kind of made a lecture, and the outline of that would be the definition of retinal vasculitis, its stages, common conditions that we see, the masqueraders, some rare entities, and a suggested list of reading. What I will not show is a list of investigations. We've had 5 days of didactic UVA lectures, and I will not show you a list of treatment. The idea of today's talk is so that you should be able to think for yourself how is the diagnostic and therapeutic approach, which needs to be tailored for uveitis. And in this talk, I'm going to try and help you with retinal vasculitis. So retinal vasculitis can be an isolated condition, or it may be an association or a complication of a local or systemic inflammation, non-specific inflammation of the retinal arterioles. There is no diagnostic criteria for retinal vasculitis. And if you were to look at the list, it is quite intimidating. Am I audible? Am I there?
You're audible, but the voice breaks a little in between.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's much better now.
But I'm not able to screen share now. Stop sharing. Manish, can you help out?
We can see your screen.
Oh, you can see my screen, but I'm seeing your screen.
Table 2.
I'm not able to see my own screen. I'm seeing your screen. Should I stop sharing and then share again? Okay, right. Okay, right. So there is a long list, of conditions, and it is quite intimidating. So if you were to try and listen, try to investigate a patient in a kind of a manner which is not tailor-made, then you will not end up anywhere. What you have to understand is that retinal vasculitis is an ophthalmoscopic finding, while vasculitis per se is a histological finding. So when we say retinal vasculitis, it does not mean that it is systemic vasculitis. And there is a beautiful paper by Professor Rosenbaum from the United States, and he has studied a large number of patients who presented with retinal vasculitis and looked for evidence of systemic vasculitis in those patients. And he found only 1.4% of the cases to have systemic vasculitis in retinal vasculitis. That means retinal vasculitis is a descriptive term for a conglomerate of typical clinical manifestations, which include perivascular sheathing, vascular leakage on angiogram, associated with signs of retinal ischemia, cotton wool spots, intraretinal hemorrhages, and neovascularization, and is not actually something that can be translated to systemic vasculitis. When you classify retinal vasculitis, you can say it is either primary or secondary. And primary basically means that there is no associated systemic disease. And if there is some secondary disease, the retinal vasculitis is occurring secondary to some infection like CMV retinitis or toxoplasmosis, then you call it secondary retinal vasculitis. So what will be the approach, clinical approach to retinal vasculitis? One, we should search for an ocular cause. And if you don't find it, then look for a systemic cause for the vasculitis. So let's start with Eales disease, which is also defined as idiopathic peripheral periphlebitis. So you can see here the peripheral areas of CNP, the posterior pole is absolutely okay. And this is a common condition affecting the young males, healthy males in India, and is seen in the Indian subcontinent very typically. It has its own characteristic natural course with peripheral capillary non-perfusion. Then there is neovascularization, and subsequently it goes into tractional retinal detachment if one is not treating it. And the pioneering work of Professor Amod Gupta from PGI has shown they have taken samples of patients whom they have operated for vitrectomy, and they have been able to isolate PCR. They have been able to isolate the mycobacterium. So I will show you my first case. It's a dentist who was MONT2 positive. He had active vasculitis and he had left eye vitreous hemorrhage. And he had a vitreous. So when we did the vitrectomy, he was very keen to have an etiological diagnosis. So I sent his PCR for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And this is way back about 6 to 7 years back. And it came out with 17,296 copies on real-time PCR. So real-time PCR is actually the correct way to study. You can get qualitative PCR positive, but when you get quantitative PCR positive, it correlates with disease. So this is how he was with persisting vasculitis, and this is his angiogram. And we have gone ahead and we have given him anti-tubercular treatment, and it has confounded to what Professor Amod Gupta has said, that there is something called tubercular retinal vasculitis. Now you can have vasculitis, which can cause any inflammation. And when it is stage 1, it is a very innocuous peripheral periphlebitis. And when it involves a larger vessel, it becomes something like a larger vein, it becomes stage 2. So you must look very carefully at the angiogram. And I'm very fond of ultrawide field angiography. And you see here, there is a branch retinal vein occlusion inflammatory, but peripheral CNP areas are there, and a neovascularization has come on, and there are large confluent areas of non-perfusion. And this I would treat, guided by my ultrawide field. I would treat all the areas of capillary non-perfusion that I see. So do keep this picture in mind. This is, and I'm going to refer to this photograph again. So sarcoidosis is not a primary vasculitic entity. In the retina, it causes vasculitis, but systemically, it does not cause vasculitis. Dr. JB had shown this slide in her talk that you can have bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy, and biopsy would show a non-caseating granuloma. And there is candle wax dripping with extensive retinal vasculitis that can occur in sarcoidosis. Sometimes, if you can see that these vessels are sclerosed, there is peripheral periphlebitis along with inferior cotton balls. And this is something very typical of sarcoidosis or granulomatous uveitis, intermediate uveitis. Now I'll come to something which we all think, or a large number of us think, that it does not exist in India. And I'm going to show you cases where I have learned how to identify Behçet's disease. And if after this talk you can understand that Behçet's disease is a real diagnosis and is not very rare in India, I think it will be helpful for you. So this retinal vasculitis is very severe, and there is a very typical picture on the angiogram. There is a diffuse capillary leak, cystoid macular edema, and there is leakage from the disc. So this is the picture of Behçet's disease clinically. You have an inflamed disc, and you see all the blood vessels are inflamed, and there is a kind of a sterile retinitis. It sometimes looks like viral retinitis. The first differential diagnosis of Behçet's disease is viral retinitis. So this is an angiogram, a typical angiogram of any patient of Behçet's disease. You see, you can see here the fern petal appearance, and the blood vessels, all the blood vessels are inflamed. This is very typical of Behçet's disease. And not only at the posterior pole, all four quadrants, all the vessels of the entire vascular tree have got inflammation with a fern petal appearance. And that is very characteristic. It is not just the macula, it is the entire vascular tree which is like that. And if you don't do anything about it, what will happen? The disc will go into pallor and all these vessels will sclerose. So this angiogram will translate into this picture, and that is Behçet's disease for me. So now I'll show you another case. This is a young male patient. He is actually an uncle of a medical student in Aligarh, and he had, phacoemulsification in the left eye, and he developed a hypopion the first post-operative day along with vitritis. Now, the dictum is if you have a hypopion on day 1 post-operatively, it is endophthalmitis unless proved otherwise. So he underwent a kind of intravitreal injections, antibiotic injections, followed by vitrectomy, and then he was referred to Shroff Eye Center. I did an angiogram, and you can see that there is a hot disc and there is a very hazy view, but even then you can see the front petal appearance. So I was going to ask him for an HLA-B51, and he said this to me: look, don't ask me for any further tests. You asked me for some basic tests. They punctured me here. You did an angiogram yesterday. This whole vessel is inflamed. So what is this? This is dermal hypersensitivity. Right there in my OPD, I wrote out his name. Can you see his name? The color of the skin changes, dermatographia. Now, this is a rare demonstration of dermatographia in the pigmented races. It's a feature that is seen in the Western population, and our skin is dark. So we have to hunt for a fair area. So you can see here that the forearm was a good point from where I could take, and I wrote his name down, and you could see the erythema, and I could make a diagnosis. Why was the diagnosis required? Because he needed phaco on the other eye, and I gave him IV cyclophosphamide. At that time, I gave him IV MP, and you can see now a generalized sclerosed vessels all over. So this is the picture of Behçet's disease. You can see all over the vessels are sclerosed. And then he had an uneventful phacoemulsification in the other eye, and he's fine. So this is Behçet's disease. Now, have a look at this 8-year-old boy. He is from Dehradun, and the posterior pole is looking absolutely normal. See the angiogram. This is very, very, very typical of Behçet's disease. So you have a firm petal appearance of the entire vascular tree. And this is Behçet's disease. There is no doubt. I did the HLA-B51, it came out positive, and the diagnosis is confirmed. So now I'll show you one case. He's a young 24-year-old male patient who had herpes zoster 6 months back. He had a branch retinal artery and vein occlusion. His MON2 was positive and his QTB was positive. But we had done his HLA-B51 and he came out positive, and he was very depressed with the diagnosis of Behçet's disease. So this is what his HLA-B51 is positive and HLA-B27 is negative here. So this is how his posterior pole is looking like in the right eye. Now, he had a recurrent hemorrhage and we were treating him like Behçet's disease, but he got a deranged liver function test on mycophenolate. So we moved him on to adalimumab because biologics are the treatment of choice for Behçet's disease. He underwent a vitrectomy, but he said, I want to rule out tuberculosis as my MON2 and quantiferon was positive. And look here, we sent it again to Shankar Netrale because Dr. Biswas is my teacher and I depend heavily on him. And it showed so many copies of the IS 6110 gene, confirming a diagnosis of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So now the point is this Behçet's disease or is it tuberculosis? So post-operatively, we did an angiogram on him. So you can see this angiogram and you can see this inferiorly. Now let's compare with the two angiograms I've shown you. This is the Behçet's angiogram. Does it look like this? No. And this is the angiogram that I showed you earlier. Does it look like this of Eales disease? Yes. This is the our patient of Behçet's disease, supposedly Behçet's disease, and this is the patient who has got the BRVO and he's got one. So this was tubercular disease and not Behçet's disease, even though his HLA-B51 was positive, and therefore we have treated him with anti-tubercular treatment, and now for 2 years he has got absolutely no inflammation, and his Eales disease or tubercular retinal vasculitis is healed. He's HLA-B51, but he is not a patient Behçet's disease. Now we come to toxoplasmosis, and as I said, you want to rule out any ocular cause. So there is a small posterior pole lesion, but when you do an ultrawide field, you see that there is a huge membrane which is stretching, and this is a toxoplasmic patient. And in toxoplasmosis, you have retinitis, and retinitis causes a confluent involvement of the retinal blood vessels. So you see it is a inflammation from without. So the retinitis here is pinching on the blood vessel and causing a secondary retinal vasculitis. And you can see the leakage on the angiogram, and you know this is not a primary retinal vasculitis. So here you can see the retinal vessel gets involved because of the toxoplasma. And what is the clue? You have a healed lesion and you have a pigment scar and you have an adjacent area of activity and you have a retinal vasculitis there. So this is toxoplasma clinically. I don't need any laboratory tests, and the retinal vasculitis is secondary to the toxoplasmic retinochoroiditis. And there is a special situation associated called Cayley's vasculitis, where there is a beading of the retinal arterioles, and there is this amazing photograph in Retinal Physician by these authors, and you can see the beading in the vessels, which is very typical of this kind of retinal vasculitis. To complete the spectrum of retinal vasculitis, you can have multiple sclerosis, you can have Takayasu disease, you have to look at both the eyes, you can have a NVI in the other eye and a central retinal artery occlusion in one eye. In systemic lupus erythematosus, you can have again vasculitis, and you can have the leakage. One thing I want to tell you about systemic lupus erythematosus is that the false VDRL is positive. VDRL can be positive in SLE, and it was one of the diagnostic criteria of SLE. We can discuss it later after this lecture, why the VDRL becomes positive in these patients. Masquerades. This is interesting. I want to tell you anemia can cause venous stasis. The reason is that when the bone marrow gets stimulated because of iron deficiency anemia, it produces more platelets. Even it can become 6 lakhs, 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs, and you can get venous stasis. And if you correct the hemoglobin levels, the rheology gets corrected, and what looks like retinal vasculitis gets slowly corrected after 1 or 2 units of blood. And I looked up the literature, in fact, last night itself, and there are central retinal vein occlusion secondary to severe iron deficiency anemia. And there are at least 6 cases in literature reported on central retinal vein occlusion after anemia. And in India, it is reasonably common. I have got fair amount of number of patients who are present with anemic retinopathy, which looks like retinal vasculitis, and correction of the anemia corrects the disease. Angiomas may look like vasculitis. You have to be careful, and an angiography clinches the diagnosis. In hemoglobinopathy of sickle cell disease, you have peripheral sickling, you have peripheral ischemia areas, and you have CFAN neovascularization. There is no retinal vasculitis. There is purely a peripheral ischemia because of sickling, and it is a differential diagnosis of peripheral retinal vasculitis or Eales disease that exists in our country. I will like to show you some very specific cases. So Optos helps us. I have no financial interest, of course, in anything. This is a young girl, a 7-year-old girl, and this looks like retinal vasculitis. But when you see the other eye, you see this paving stone degeneration and a kind of a pattern indicating that this is FEVR and this is not retinal vasculitis. So, you must look at both the eyes, correlate the picture, and therefore we just did the laser to this and an anti-VEGF, and it did not require any steroid treatment, and we were able to control the condition. You have a far peripheral lesion that looks like a TRD. You do an angiogram, and this is actually a toxocara, and this is not retinal vasculitis. So you must look at the complete picture. So this is one patient of retinal vasculitis. You can see the sheathing and leakage. You can see hard exudates with staining. You can see CNP areas. You can see shunt vessels. And there is no posterior pole inflammation. But the VEGF that is being produced here is causing macular edema. So this macular edema will respond more to anti-VEGF than to steroid because it is driven by the CNP from the periphery rather than from the inflammation at the posterior pole. So one ultra-wide field picture of a retinal vasculitis eye tells you a lot of things about that. So I'd like to summarize by saying that you should look at the entire picture. You should know the demographic factors. I've shown you tubercular etiology. I've shown you Behçet's disease. I've shown you a confusing case which looks like Behçet's disease but turns out to be tubercular. You must look at the underlying etiology, recognize the patterns of uveitis and relevant lab tests in your own condition, in your own practicing areas. And remember, retinal vasculitis can be sight-threatening, especially in conditions like Behçet's disease and retinal vasculitis and SLE, and it's our responsibility. I would say that you can type in retinal vasculitis and you will get this wonderful review by Dr. Anirudh Agarwal, who was one of the 6 speakers for this symposium, and he has done a very good job. And another article here, so by Dr. Rosenbaum. So I'd say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Shishir, for a wonderful presentation. There were so many take-home messages in that, and one important point that I have learned from your talk is that when we are treating retinal vasculitis, we are in so much hurry to treat these patients. Especially in cases of retinal vasculitis, because we see cases and we want to give systemic steroids straight away, treat the vasculitis. So a very less concentration goes on to finding the etiology. And especially in the tubercular retinal vasculitis that you mentioned in the initial slides, if you load the patient with systemic steroids and we don't know the etiology, I think it can be very troublesome for the patient. So in those cases, how do you manage if for example, cases with retinal vasculitis?
Yeah, I actually shortened my talk. If there is very severe inflammation at the posterior pole, then you would like to go ahead and treat it straight away. You do the basic tests. MANTO or quantiferon does not become negative. It does change but it does not become significantly different within a day or two. So if you have got a very severe vasculitis like the one I showed you at the posterior pole, if you will wait for the investigations, you will actually end up with losing vision. So you can give even IV methylprednisolone or even cyclophosphamide if you are thinking that it is a systemic vasculitis which is causing it. But do send the bloods and labs straight away. And sometimes the diagnosis will not come on the first day. It will come over and over again. You see, you don't stop trying to find the etiology. Like Dr. Manisha's talk
Yes.
yesterday, you had a patient which on biopsy came out to be positive. My patient, which I showed you, was labeled as Behçet's disease because its HLA-B51 was positive, and it took almost 1 year before we could send the vitreous specimen and it came out to be positive for TB. So you send the labs, but don't give up looking for the diagnosis. And I think ultimately you're able to make a final diagnosis which will help the patient.
Yes. And one very important message from your talk was also to do a lot of FFA, especially because I think a lot of my cases must have got missed. My Behçet's cases would have got missed because the fern petal appearance on FFA is so diagnostic.
Ma'am,
So I think
you're talking about yourself. I'm talking about myself. I had not picked up even a single patient of Behçet's in from 2001 to 2014, and I feel a culprit because I never knew this thing. Maybe not
yes,
2014, maybe till 2012, and then one of the presentations from various eminent speakers, and I said, "Look, I've been seeing that I reviewed," and then I said, "I'm missing Behçet's disease." In fact, I was invited for a multi-centered trial in Behçet's disease. And I said, you see, it does not exist in India. And now I have got about 30 patients, and
yes,
the drug of choice is biologics, and it is very important. And I've shown you, one eye has got fern petal, the other eye doesn't. And 2 months later, the whole thing will, both the eyes will have it. And a year later, you will have a picture of a burnt out disc and sclerosed vessels. And we say, you have come very late. It's not that the
it's very
patient has
amazing.
come
Yes,
late.
yes, yes.
It's
I think I'm very impressed by that, and I'm going to do a lot more FFAs, only not to just rule out CNP areas, but then also to rule out to clinch the proper etiology.
Ma'am, you can see
Um,
that patient was presented as endophthalmitis is actually Behçet's disease. And
yes,
our dictum
that
is
was
hypopian. Hypopian because you see sometimes Behçet's does not leave any anterior segment signs. So you saw the other eye was put to show that it does not have synechian pigment. If there is a bilateral synechian festoon pupil, then you know you are dealing with a hypopian which is related to uveitis. But if you have a absolutely normal looking eye, and then you have the hypopian, that is very typical of Behçet's disease or leptospirosis.
yes. Another point which you had mentioned was your patients with CRV or secondary to anemia. How did you actually manage those cases? Just by treating the anemia, or did you do anything related to any kind of steroid treatment or any kind of anti-VEGF?
Ma'am, this is a very old slide. This is almost 10 years old. All the patients are either doctors or relatives of doctors because, very interestingly, they are the ones who don't give up the diagnosis. This is actually the photograph of a gynecologist in one of the leading hospitals in Delhi, and she
Okay,
was doing IVF treatment. So she was going through heavy doses of for induction of ovulation, and she was having menorrhagia. And because of that, because of the endometriosis, she was developing very acute loss of blood. And this is a slow anemia does not cause this picture. Acute anemia causes this picture. What happens is when the hemoglobin level goes down, then the bone marrow gets stimulated, and the megakaryocytes of the platelet and the RBC are the same. So, but the iron deficiency is there, so they produce more platelets and rather than producing RBC because there is no,
okay.
so it becomes a microcytic hypochromic anemia,
That
but
causes the stasis.
that causes the stasis. And you give 2 units of blood, and within 48 hours, the whole procedure resolves.
Okay, wonderful.
So it is venous, and the clue is CBC. For me, the most important thing is a CBC, and I look at the ESR. If the CBC is abnormal, it is anemia. If the ESR is very high, it is a systemic vasculitis. If it is 2 or 3, I'm dealing with an ocular cause. If there is a monocytosis, then I'm dealing with granulomatous inflammation. If the eosinophils are more than 10 or 12, I'm dealing with the toxoplasmosis. So CBC tells me the diagnosis in at least 70% of my patients. Just by knowing the CBC and looking at the angiogram, I am able to
That's a
make a
very important
diagnosis.
point you have made here, and I hope all the postgraduates are paying attention to what sir has just said. So, as an investigation as basic as CBC can tell you so much about the diagnosis. There's a question, Dr. Shishir, by Dr. Divya, and her question is: can choroiditis lead
Yeah.
to retinal angiomatosis proliferation, and what can be the possible causes?
Yeah, so a RAP can be a feature of tuberculoma, and till we did not know this, we were treating them with the anti-tubercular treatment. It was causing necrosis, and you used to go into NVI and thysis, and then we realized that these choroidal granulomas are ischemic. There is a huge amount of VEGF that is produced, and that causes a RAP lesion to develop in these choroidal angiomas and choroidal tuberculomas. And if you give them anti-VEGF, typically Avastin was given, you can regress this, and then you can treat them with anti-tubercular treatment, and you will be successful and will be able to save the eye. So a really large granuloma in the eye, which is ischemic and producing anti-VEGF, can be a stimulus for RAP lesions, typically tubercular granulomas, infective tubercular abscesses in the Indian setting.
Any other questions? Any postgraduates would like to ask any questions, or you can also unmute and ask directly.
Yeah, it would be nice if you can. We have a few minutes. You can definitely uh, ask whatever you may have in mind.
Even if it's a basic question, don't
Something.
hesitate. Yes, please
Let,
go
let
ahead. And
Okay, tell me, why should the VDRL be positive in patients of SLE? Anybody would like to answer that question?
Sir, it would be because of the cross-reactivity, the cardiolipin antigen.
Yeah, so you're right, Abhishek. So we had discussed that in our class earlier. I've taught my postgraduates. So basically, the VDRL is done so with the antigen as the ox heart. So cardiolipin antibody will cross-react with the ox heart. So anti-cardiolipin antibody is positive in SLE patients, and therefore you can actually have a positivity or false positivity of VDRL in SLE. In fact, it was one of the diagnostic criteria by the society, and then they removed that diagnostic criteria from their list earlier on.
any other questions? If there are no other questions, I would like to thank Dr. Shishir for his time and his excellent presentation and so many important take-home messages, so many things to learn. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you to have invited me to take part in this symposium, and I hope this topic has some relevance to the postgraduates in terms of learning process for them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Shishir, and I will just hand over to Dr. Satyajit. He will make the concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shishir Narayan, for that beautiful presentation, and a big thank you to Dr. Pooja for moderating. Thank you so much. If any postgraduates have any questions later, they will write to me, and I'll pass it on to you at a later time through email also. This will be on a recording on YouTube also, so the postgraduates can see this recording again on the YouTube also. I would like to inform all the postgraduates that on Monday we have Dr. Swati who is faculty at AIIMS New Delhi, and she'll be speaking on examination techniques in neuro-ophthalmology. So we have 6 days of neuro-ophthalmology from Monday to Saturday, and we have faculty from Shankar Nethralaya, from AIIMS, from Center for Sight, from LV Prasad Eye Institute, Darshan Eye Care, and Narayan Krupat Specialty Eye Hospital, Noble Eye Care. So we have some of the very best faculties from all over the country, like we had for UVIA in this week. Like we are very grateful to Dr. Shishir Narayan, who was there today. So there are different topics in neuro-ophthalmology. One is examination techniques in neuro-ophthalmology, then approach to a patient with disc edema, ocular motility problems, common optic neuropathies, visual field quiz is there, and neuroimaging is there. So I look forward to seeing all of you next week from 5 o'clock onwards. And the first talk will be by Dr. Swati from AIIMS. Dr. Shishir, thank you so much once again for your time and all the effort that you have put in for teaching the postgraduates. We are very, very grateful to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Pooja. And thank you, Intas Pharmaceuticals, Manish ji and Chandrasekhar ji for bringing this all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shishir.
Thank you, Satyajit, for inviting me. It was really nice. I've taken participation in 3 of your talks, so really learned a lot. And thank you, Manish, for giving your afternoon today to sort out so that we have minimum hiccups during the presentation. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
so very
It's our
much.
pleasure always, sir. Thank you very
Bye.
much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.